Hey there, fellow creators, Ben here from Cinder Studios, and this week I want to talk about 5 common mistakes that acrylic painters make and how to fix them. Stick around. So I've seen a lot of other artists on YouTube make videos like this, and while some of them have at least some of the right ideas, I find that a lot of the 5 mistakes videos that come out are often highly suggestive and subjective, rather, and don't necessarily promote the best practices. Or someone will say, oh, well, this is a mistake, don't do it, but they don't necessarily show you why you shouldn't do it. So not only will I be giving you my personal 5 common mistakes, but how to fix them. Okay, so the first one is very simple, but is often overlooked. I've talked about it in my videos a few times before. Now, acrylics, generally, when you're mixing and moving the paint around, you want to have a vehicle to help you do that. With oil paint, that would be something like linseed oil or turpentine, so the two extremes of adding more oil or adding the solvent. With watercolors, you're mixing with water, and with acrylics, you're also mixing with water. I've got a nice big water bucket. I always sit here next to my palette because the first thing I do, unless I'm dry brushing, of course, is to dip my brush in that water, shake a little off, and wet those bristles. You think, okay, well, why is that a common mistake? That seems really obvious. I think a lot of people, what turns them off from traditional heavy body acrylics, and a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like heavy body acrylics. Chances are it's because they're not dipping their brush in water before they're going into paint. If you just go straight brush into paint without that dip, what you end up having is paint that doesn't necessarily move around that easily. But as soon as you wet your bristles and then take it into your paint, then take it to your canvas or wood, it moves so much easier and it spreads so much faster. Because, simple thing, you need just a little bit of water to help bring that paint to life. The second mistake I see quite a lot is not covering paint with more paint. A lot of people will end up treating their pieces like a paint by number. Well, they'll do one layer, and that's it. They won't ever touch it ever again. Like, okay, I put down that layer of grass. Now it's just green. It's done. You got to build a lot of different layers up if you want to make a really good painting. Now, there is some level of, okay, I'm doing a flat surface or something like that, but even if you're making a single flat colored surface, give it an extra coat of paint. I mean, if you're painting your walls in your house, you're going to need a couple of coats. And the same goes for canvas or wood panel. When you graduate out of coloring books and paint by numbers, you also have to graduate from forcing yourself to stay within the lines. That's, it's like you color within the lines when you're a kid to build up hand-eye coordination. When it comes to canvas, you got to be able to go outside the lines and make up new ideas and find shapes in your piece that maybe weren't necessarily in the plan, but like, hey, this would look good here. Well, slap some more paint on top of it. And you also might be thinking, well, I don't want to just cover up I put all this paint on there. I don't want to just cover it up entirely. Well, no, you don't cover up entirely. You put little bits of paint on top of that, glazing, dry brushing, to make a more complex and interesting piece, both visually in terms of color and color layering, but also in terms of textural work, too. Similarly, overworked colors can be a thing, too. Now, it's a little more forgiving than, say, with watercolors, where things can get muddy very quickly. Oils have a similar problem, too. You just keep mixing your paint, and all of a sudden it's just sludge. Acrylics are a little more forgiving in that way, but you can definitely overmix your colors a bit. For this, I actually recommend, especially towards the later stages of your piece, that you don't use the knife to mix your paint, but instead use a brush and just be grabbing little bits of color at a time. This way the paint stays a little bit more varied, especially in your mixes. There's a temptation, I feel, for a lot of artists to just mix your colors into oblivion until they're all perfectly clean little piles of color. Not necessarily the best look. Again, if you're going for a more flat graphical style, yes, that tends to be the way to go. But if you're doing something more complex, like a fantasy landscape, a lot of what I do, you want that little bit of variation. Now, some people might say, well, the color's all streaky in there, and you can see like all these different colors in the brush. It's like, yes, that's the point. You want to have that little bit of different color variation to, again, make a more complex and interesting piece. The fourth mistake is one that a lot of people will use as a mistake, but take it a step a little too far. My thing is too much black. A lot of people will say, oh, don't use black at all, never use black. Black has some very important uses in all types of painting. You don't have to completely get rid of black, but you should probably use it more sparingly. Now, I have a nice big jar of it. I do like using it in my work. But over the years, I've really come to embrace how important blue is in place of black, especially for things like shadows. Now, again, there's going to be things that I'll use black for. A lot of times I'm using final touches. But I wanted to show you guys a more complete example because I'm not done with this one yet. And as you can see through this video, I'm still working on it. So I finished this painting last month. And there are a lot of darks in this piece. But just looking at it now, see if you can guess where the black is. And guess what? Just take a minute, pause the video if you need to, but this probably looks like it has a lot of black in it, right? All of these shadows in the rocks, all over this place, the trees are very, very dark. There's very little black in this piece. All of the darks you're seeing is blue over top of brown to give a very, very dark appearance without actually being black. Here's where I use black in this piece. Yes, there are a little bit in the rocks, but it's very sparing, and honestly, looking at it, I can't even tell where I put it. The figures at the very bottom of the piece which are very small in a lot of my work. Those are in black. I use black when mixing the cool grays for the characters carved into the rocks. And there is a tiny bit of it on the very edges of these trees. But that is all I use black for in this piece. Okay, there is a slight exception to the black thing, and that's my used paint mixes, which, again, the rocks and the trees and everything, there's probably black in these. Actually, there's definitely black in these, but they're so far gone at this point to a different color, I don't really consider that black. And also, I didn't necessarily need black to get them this color. And the final mistake that I see a lot is oversaturation. Now, this is one of those instances of do what I say, not what I do. I like saturated colors, personally. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're always a good thing. In the vast majority of cases, you want to be mixing with your complements in order to kick back either the tone or the hue of that color in order to create something a little bit more complex and most of the time a little bit more realistic. If you're struggling to paint realistically, start mixing more with your complements. I took a couple of the colors that are on my palette for this current piece, mixed them with some of the other complements I had around. They weren't 100% accurate to an exact one-to-one because I'm not using pure primaries here. But it is that just noticeable shift. And they're like, well, that's a completely different color. It's like, well, but if you do that across the entire piece, it will look more unified. So while there's a lot of misinformation and highly opinionated, subjective ideas of what the mistakes acrylic painters make are, these are mine. It took me a while to come up with these because I was really trying to think about like, the core things that I would see someone who's new to acrylics make. And there's a lot of them. Again, there are more. I do see other things, but I feel like these are the ones that would cause the most amount of headaches. If you have any ideas, though, of pretty common mistakes, let me know in comments below, and let's discuss what we could do to rectify a lot of those mistakes. As always, though, if you learned something or enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps this channel and the video out. Get subscribed if you're not already. Check me out on the socials in the description box below, including the community Discord, as well as my brand new newsletter available sign up is available by going to cinderblockstudios.com and signing up on the homepage. Thanks, guys, for watching. Keep on creating, and this is Ben from Cinderblock Studios, and I will see you guys next time.